Representative Ileana Ros Lehtinen, do you remember when you first walked through the halls of Congress as a freshman member, what you were thinking?
I said, "Wow." I had to pinch myself. Is this real? Because we had a whammo special election. Claude Pepper had passed away, longtime Democrat congressman from Miami. So we had a special election, got elected, and then just a few days later, sworn in. And it was just a lot of activity, fast and furious. So I didn't have the privilege of having orientation or having a couple of months to fill staff, and we were housed in three separate offices in three buildings. You know, a little cubby here, a little cubby here, and a little cubby there. But the nicest thing that happened to me is that Dante Fascell, who was a Democrat congressman from Miami, from my area, was the chairman of Foreign Affairs, and he said, "Ileana, I know that you're here because of your foreign affairs passion. So we don't have an opening at Foreign Affairs, but I'll put your little card table and a folding chair, and I'll talk to the speaker about changing the ratios so I could have a seat at the table." So that's what I remember, the kindness of everybody who was here already and helping me. And Bill Lehman, Democrat from Miami, he helped me to understand the franking privileges of that you could mail letters to constituents back when we were doing letters to constituents. So, because I got elected in a special September 1989 and served almost 30 years. So, went through a lot of changes, but folks were really nice to me, and I appreciated that.
And of course, you had a Republican president, George H.W. Bush, a Democratic Speaker of the House. Is that kindness that you refer to lacking today?
It is. It absolutely is. I am a Republican in the mold of Bush 41 and Bush 43, even though people still say vile things about those Republicans if they're really partisan Democrats, but they were gentlemen. And Bush 41 helped me a lot in getting elected. Came down to Miami and did a fundraiser for me on his way to Kennebunkport because that's so convenient to stop in Miami on the way to Maine. And then I was very close to Bush 43, and I always like to work in a bipartisan manner. Uh, my district at first was quite Democratic, overwhelmingly so. This was in the beginning days of Republicans slowly getting control and adding our numbers, but you had to work in a Democratic way, in a bipartisan way, otherwise you wouldn't get anything passed. And now I think folks, I know I sound like an old timer. Back in my days, people were nicer, but they really were. People were kinder and nicer. But now every election could be a change election, and that changes the tone and the tenor of Congress. They worry about their votes. They worry about mean tweets, and social media did not exist. Heck, we just had cell phones for the first time in my campaign in 1989. So it's changed a lot, not for the better.
But the underlying issue is the incentive or lack thereof to cross the aisle. And there are a number of factors. You talked about the media, money in politics, and the way districts are drawn. So address those three
Absolutely.
issues, especially gerrymandered districts.
Gerrymandered districts, that is not just a term, old fashioned word. It is still very much in vogue and in use today. Now, Florida, we had a commission established and they would draw the lines, but that got thrown out. And the lines didn't improve much. It was still very much drawn to suit the incumbents and make it harder for challengers. And so, if you were a Republican, what you wanted is a very Republican seat. And even though the lines are not drawn by us, in Florida's case, they're drawn by the state legislators in Tallahassee. And I was a state legislator there, so I know what that process was like. You wanted to get as Republican a district as you could get, or as Democratic a district as you could get. But that doesn't necessarily make you a better member of Congress. I think I became a better member of Congress because toward that last years of my service in Congress, I had a district that was not a third, a third, a third, but pretty balanced. You couldn't be so Republican because you had a good chunk of Democrats, and you had a good chunk of nonpartisan, independent voters, and Now, Florida has changed a lot. It's an overwhelmingly Republican state. I would have never thought that that would be possible when I started in Congress. But gerrymandering is a real problem because you tend to then just focus on the Republicans in your district if you have this overwhelmingly Republican seat, or the Democrats on the other way. It doesn't make you a better member of Congress. It's good um, to have that kind of balance.
So would Ileana Ros Lehtinen get elected in today's Republican Party?
I would say that yes, because I was very constituent minded. I'm not as Republican as some of the Republicans would like, but there's still a lot of bipartisan Republicans around, and I paid attention to my district. So constituent service for me was number one. Even though I was very involved in foreign affairs, that was because I was born in Cuba, lost my homeland to communism, so that mattered greatly to me. We had a lot of Haitians coming in because their country was uh, becoming a real problem, and we have now a lot of Venezuelans and Nicaraguans and Colombians. So foreign affairs was very important, but I would help my constituents in becoming residents, becoming citizens. So constituent service was very key.
Did you ever cast a vote, sponsor or co-sponsor a bill that you thought, you know what, I'm going to get primaried because of this?
Absolutely. I would say I was one of the early Republican defenders of marriage equality, and I knew that that was not a very popular topic at all. I voted for the original bill during Bill Clinton's time, defining marriages between a man and a woman. But I switched my position and I co-sponsored the bill to have it, as we say, love is love, and to have marriage equality, marriage with the same sex and same gender. And then, of course, we had the Supreme Court rulings, et cetera. So, though that kind of vote uh, would have gotten me a primary, but I always told my constituents, I'm going to vote my conscience. I'm going to come home and I'm going to defend my votes. And you can quiz me on it and challenge me. I didn't have a problem. It turned out to be not a problem because I was honest with them. They knew how I was going to vote. But marriage equality was one of those votes where I thought, uh-oh, this is going to be a real problem for me politically.
So how do you navigate, how do members navigate their own personal beliefs, your own background coming here from Cuba, and yet also trying to balance that with what you thought is best for your district?
Very tricky. You learn to be a great surfer. You try to stay on the board and not let the waves wipe you out. And I just became a great surfer. And always in touch with the community. And when people see you and hear you, and they see you visible, acting on behalf of their concerns, they're willing to forgive you for a vote or two that is not in their what they consider their best interest or not in keeping with their values. So I found that constituents were more forgiving than I first thought, and I thought that I would be getting in trouble many times, but I never did.
Your district is a 2.5, 3-hour flight from Washington, D.C. How much time did you spend in the district, and how much time did you spend with special interest groups?
Well, every weekend I would go back home. As soon as the votes are done, I'm the first one out the door because dance with the ones that brung you, as Ronald Reagan said. The people of my district are the ones who are important to me, and so my husband was at home in Miami. Our kids were there, and when they were small, they would come up with me, and my mom would fly up with me. But so I always said that I was not a typical working mom because I had great family support. I had a husband who understood this. We met in the state legislature, so he knows what a crazy life politics is. And my parents were very involved in my children's lives. So not a typical working mom. We had an extended Cuban family that helped me so much. But special interest groups, everything is a special interest group. If you go to a school in your neighborhood, that's a special interest group. It doesn't necessarily have to be big oil or big pharma or big sugar. I mean, every group that cares about their issue, that's a special interest group. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And I would meet with special interest groups, but mostly constituents and constituent service. That was my claim to fame, and that I think that they forgave me a lot of votes because of my constituent service.
Let's talk about Congress as a whole, the committee process, the number of members, the 2-year cycle, the schedule, the calendar. If you could make changes to Congress as an institution, what would they be?
Well, great question. And we had wonderful committees for the modernization of Congress, and they did a great job of having different recommendations of how to make your work life balance a little bit more balanced. And so I congratulate those folks who served on that committee, and I was able to testify in front of them. And I would say scheduling, predictability, uh, um, so important, knowing that we have a schedule, you do know when you're going to be able to go home, and sticking to it. But I find that I see now it's even more difficult for members. And now they have social media to contend with, and they will be followed if they're not in a certain event. So I think it's harder for members to do their jobs, even though technology has improved supposedly to make our jobs easier. I think that today's members of Congress have a far more challenging role than I did in my days because of the presence of social media. And also, you can tailor your message to a certain audience because if you're conservative, you go to Fox. If you're liberal, you go to MSNBC. And there's so many other outlets that were not around at that time when I first started. Uh, it was uh, it was far more difficult for you to be able to get on TV, and far more important because people would read newspapers. Now that's not the most popular way to get information, and to be on a Sunday show, a local show, that would be very important. It's not as important now because you have different avenues available to you.
How difficult is it to buck the party leadership? Because you've worked under a number of Republican speakers, most notably Newt Gingrich, who in many ways changed Congress as an institution, also with Speaker Pelosi. But for Republican speakers, if you want to buck them in a vote, how difficult was that for you?
It can be difficult. And I tell you, Newt Gingrich really was such an important figure for the Republican Party because he was the first leader who said, change your mentality. We are going to be in the majority. Don't think like a minority member anymore. We're going to take over. And Bob Michael, I served under him. He was our minority leader before Newt, and Newt became our speaker with a contract with America. Excuse me, but when you talk about bucking leadership, I was one of 3 Republicans who did not sign the contract with America. But we did it. Lincoln Diaz Balart and Don Young were the other 2, because it would take away benefits for folks who are immigrants. And I had a very immigrant rich community. But the way that I handled it, and it didn't become a problem for me, is that I told Newt, I can't sign it because of this provision. Don Young refused to sign it because he says, the only contract I have are with the people of Alaska. But Lincoln and I did not sign it. And that was the Bible of our Republican leadership. And but if you do it in a nice way, you can buck leadership if they understand where you are and why you're voting that way, and your motivation. I think even though difficult and uncomfortable, it's not a problem. They will not resent it. I never had any blowback from Newt Gingrich because I didn't sign the contract with America. And if you see his speaker portrait, it is of him holding the contract with America. And he revolutionized our party for the better. He was a dynamic leader, and we need those kind of leaders.
You make reference to the MAGA movement. There is no question that Donald Trump has changed the Republican Party. My question is, has he changed Congress as an institution? Are you worried about Article 1 and the role of the executive legislative and judicial branches of our government?
Well, Donald Trump is very popular, far more popular than I ever was. So I'm not going to criticize him for what he's doing, because what he's doing is working, and people like him. Um, I would say, as you point out, our founding fathers did write Article 1 of the Constitution that grants certain powers to Congress. They purposely wrote the powers of the executive branch, the presidency, as Article 2. So that tells you our founding fathers said Congress should decide these actions. And I served 2 years under President Trump in the first go around, and I never had any difficulty with him. He's of a different type of Republican. Now we have many great types of Republicans. He's different than I am, but I had a bill signing ceremony because I passed a bill, my last bill in Congress, to put sanctions on Nicaragua, on the Ortega regime, and he held a bill signing ceremony in the Oval Office for my bill. So, and he's very popular. I think that Congress should assert itself more. I think that we need to um, recognize our own power, as our founding fathers designed our the founding documents, and we're a representative republic, but we're very hesitant to show our muscles because President Trump is so overwhelmingly popular.
So, what advice do you give your colleagues? How do you ensure that we have three separate, equal branches of government and that one branch is not usurping the authority of another?
I think they're doing fine. I don't think that they need any advice from me. I think they're comfortable with their roles. And if President Trump starts to become less popular, maybe they will assert their role more decisively. But right now, because he's so popular, if you were to assert your role under Article 1, your constituents would not like that very much, because they voted for Donald Trump. And yes, they voted for you, but they mostly voted for Donald Trump. So, it's politics is a pendulum. We've had times when the executive branch was really strong, times when Congress uh, demanded to be taken seriously. I mean, we've appropriated funds, and yet those funds are not being used in the correct way. But I would not advise any member of Congress to buck a very popular uh, president, unless there's some overarching need for you to do so. Because what President Trump is proposing is in keeping with their values as well. It's a far more conservative Republican Party in Congress now than it was when I served there.
And finally, there's a general agreement. I think you would concur that there's way too much money in politics. How do you fix the system? Is it fixable?
I think it is fixable. There are many good governance groups who have proposed changes, whether it's limitations on dark money, or super PACs or independent groups.
But
When
that's free speech. That's the problem.
that's what it is. They've put up those petitions, but people don't want their rights to be curtailed, because they're saying, well, I belong to this association, of whatever, truck drivers, and we should be contributing to members of Congress, punishing or rewarding members of Congress. So it's been litigated, and it's been held to be correct. Now, when I was first elected in 1989, what mattered greatly was how much you raised and how much your opponent raised. Now, that's just one part of the big pie. It matters how much you raise in your PAC. We didn't have a PAC in 1989. Nobody had their own PAC. And you didn't have these outside groups. You had some, Committee for Responsible Government. You didn't know what the heck that was. And of course, they don't coordinate with you. So, but now there are just so many of those. So the influence of money in Congress at all levels, local all the way to the presidency, is really quite different than when I first started in the Stone Age.
Representative Ileana Ros Lehtinen, thank you so much for the conversation.
Well,
We appreciate it.
thank you to your organization, because the Former Members of Congress Association, you have these great study groups, and you go travel to Germany and this place and that place. You have great programs for members where people are brought in and they exchange ideas. It's really a fantastic organization. Congratulations for uh, existing, because it's a wonderful. Oh, and then your statesman awards. I mean, that's just a mob that goes there. So congrats on everything you do to make our government stronger and more directly heard by the people we represent.
We approve that message. Thank you.